Live from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta, this is Lawmakers for April 21st, 2010, the 38th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. Here are your hosts.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Susan Hoffman.
And I'm Wendy Lawson, live from the Lawmakers newsroom at the Capitol.
Coming up on tonight's program, work continues late into the session on a transportation funding solution, and more developments on House Democrats' challenge to the legality of the fees bill.
But first, our top story tonight, the FY 2011 budget passes the Senate. And the Senate today did approve the spending plan for the 2011 fiscal year. Senate Appropriations Chair Jack Hill said that with a 25% decline in revenues over the past 3 years and the total exhaustion of federal stimulus dollars, there are few highlights in the budget. Still, the Senate, he said, attempted to maintain funding for important programs, including capital improvement for the Board of Regents, which Hill explained owned more property than any other state agency.
There's about $245 million in highway construction bonds, which will, I think, bring highway construction funds to the entire state. These projects, I'm understanding, are really going to be based on what is the quickest economic impact we can have with a road project. And so these projects will be designed to be essential to industry or to moving cargo or to rail crossings that need to be straightened out so rail traffic can move in an expeditious way. We got to get our infrastructure ready in this state to ensure that when the port traffic, which is due to increase when the Panama Canal widening is finished in 2014, we've got to get our port ready for what may well be a tripling or quadrupling of the traffic through the Savannah port. If we can get that deepening project done, there are very knowledgeable people who believe the sky is the limit for that port. It's important once you get the containers on the land, it's important that they be transported to other parts of the country as easily and quickly as possible. Time is money in that business.
And the Senate approved HB 948, the fiscal year 2011 budget, by a vote of 49-2. Later in the day, the Senate disagreed with the House version of the budget, paving the way for a conference committee. And in other news, the House Senate Transportation Committee has come to an agreement on a statewide transportation plan. At this hour, both houses are considering House Bill 277, which divides the state into 12 transportation districts. These can earn state dollars by agreeing on projects and then sending those plans to the voters. Now, when the conference committee met this morning, there was controversy about how MARTA might spend money earned in a special local option sales tax, whether it could be used only for capital improvements or also for maintenance and operations, or M&O.
For some reason, we got a lot of interest in M&O now, and we're trying to listen to those concerns and doing what we can. And in this bill, we have addressed M&O in terms of what the current money that's received by from the taxpayers for MARTA. We're still listening and trying to understand this better. But to tell you the truth, y'all have surprised us in moving from the debate from what we always thought SPLOST was building capital assets. And so you all are going to have to bear with us as we listen, but I think the general public always associates SPLOST with something that they can actually see, not somebody's salary.
Agreement by that conference committee on the transportation bill. House Bill 277 is at this hour being considered by both the House and the Senate. We're going to check in with Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report, in just a few moments to find out the latest.
In other news, Attorney General Thurbert Baker says yes, the state is vulnerable to a lawsuit because legislators passed House Bill 1055 last week without a fiscal note. Just so you know, a fiscal note is an estimate on what impact a bill may have on state revenues. House Bill 1055 included 2 major tax breaks, one for property owners, the other for seniors 65 and older. Collectively, they amount to nearly $400 million in lost state revenues over the next 5 years. House Democratic Leader DeBose Porter asked Attorney General Baker for a ruling.
Well, what he confirms is what we're saying. There's a statute that says you have to have a fiscal note to add tax bills to legislation like this after the 20th day. There's some discretion on the procedure that the Speaker or the Lieutenant Governor has in each House on germaneness. We're not talking about germaneness. I want that to be clear, because that's what the other side keeps saying it's about. It's about a statute that says you can't put a budget bill out this way. And what Thurbert Baker confirms is that is the law. They still have to follow the law, and by not doing it has us open to challenge. If that law is challenged and overturned, then the budget is not balanced and therefore invalid, and then would bring us back to a special session.
Are you planning on taking legal action?
If it's not, we don't know who, but certainly some citizen will, because it was done unlawfully.
One very important point, the Attorney General says while the state is vulnerable to a suit, the courts have been very reluctant to render judgments on the inner workings of the legislative branch of government. House Speaker David Ralston had no comment on Baker's response because he hadn't read Baker's letter yet. And House Speaker Jerry Keene says that after reading Baker's letter that he is extremely confident the General Assembly's actions will be upheld should a suit be filed.
And the Senate today agreed to allow schools to earn middle school money, whether or not they are organized as 6th, 7th, and 8th grade campuses. House Bill 907, however, passed with 2 amendments aimed at expanding the state's special needs scholarship program.
Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 really deal with the same subject, and that is making sure that the process for parents and students who want to apply for the special needs scholarship that has been in place a couple of years can do so at intervals instead of only one time during the year, and that the payments that are made to those schools are made in equal payments in intervals throughout the year instead of only one time during the year. And Amendment number 2 deals with the notification to those parents that their students may in fact be eligible to receive or take part in the program.
Both of the Rogers amendments were successful. House Bill 907 passed 41-8 with changes that do send it back to the House. The Senate also agreed today to limit financial aid opportunities to colleges and universities that have been located in Georgia for more than a decade. Senator Steve Thompson argued that House Bill 311 is aimed at one institution.
The eligibility is 10 years. Well, the University of Phoenix has been here 9 years. That's not an accident. They'll be here 10 years next year. That is not an accident. I think it's aimed at that institution because they would qualify for people being able to get different scholarship programs, Pell Grants and things like that. And that's $2 million now.
Senate Higher Education Chair Seth Harp said the reduction in lottery revenues is the rationale behind a 4-year financial aid freeze for new institutions.
If we don't do this, then what we do is we cut the tuition equalization grants that go to our other private schools, such as Mercer, Morehouse, and all the other schools, and they end up getting less money, or we cut pre-K. Do I like doing that? Do I like doing this? No, I sure don't. But the bottom line is this is one of the hard choices that we have to make.
House Bill 311 passed 31-17. A motion to reconsider was unsuccessful. Now those changes made in the Senate do send it back to the House.
And the House okays a bill that would require high schools to submit student transcripts, grades 9 through 12, or 9 through 11 rather, to the Georgia Student Finance Corporation. Here's Representative Len Walker on Senate Bill 340.
Senate Bill 340 simply requires our local school systems, including those private school systems, to supply an electronic transcript of courses and course grades to the Georgia Student Finance Corporation that will enable students and parents to make knowledgeable decisions about course choices, and also provides high school counselors and parents with an additional tool to monitor a student's academic progress. It eliminates that dreaded senior surprise that has affected some of our students. When they get to an institution of higher education, they sometimes tragically discover that their grade point average is not what it needs to be in order to receive the Hope Scholarship. Hopefully, Senate Bill 340 will alleviate that problem and give our students a better tool to discover and determine where they are in their academic progress in high school.
The bill, Senate Bill 340, passed 141 to 4. It goes to Governor Perdue. Also today, the House says yes to a bill that allows for charter school clusters. Here's Representative Fran Millar speaking on Senate Bill 457.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill deals with high school clusters, which would be, for example, if you've got a collection of elementary schools and a middle school and high school all involved in the same system, how they can, through a vote of the various school councils, as well as by the parents and the faculty, become a charter cluster on a converted basis. It still has to be approved by the local school board system, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
The bill, Senate Bill 457, passed 134 to 0. The House did make some changes, so that means it has to go back to the Senate.
And the House today was able to pass legislation to overcome some of the constitutional challenges to the state's sex offender legislation. Senator Seth Harp explained to members that it was difficult to overcome some of the federal challenges.
Now, I know many members of the General Assembly who are not lawyers think that when we enact a law, it happens and the law is there and it's done. But the bottom line is that it runs into a document that every single member of this body holds cherishes. That is the United States Constitution. And the final arbitrator of what is constitutional and is not constitutional is either a state judge or a federal judge.
Bill 571 did pass by substitute, and changes made in the Senate do send that measure back to the House.
And in the House says yes to a bill designed to more accurately assess our property values and to make the appeals process a bit more fair. Here's Representative Edward Lindsay on Senate Bill 346.
What the bill seeks to do is simply do this. It simply accomplishes two major goals. Number one, it seeks to have the property in our state properly assessed under our current system, so as close as possible to the fair market value for tax purposes. And number two, it provides for a fair and expeditious manner for appealing assessment valuations. Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, let me sort of walk through some of the key points of the bill. In Section 1.1, the most important aspects is it will provide for an annual notice of assessment to all property tax owners, property owners in the state of Georgia. As part of this assessment notice, you'll be provided with information first off regarding the actual assessed value of your property, as well as an estimate of your tax burden that will be assessed against you based on the previous year's millage rates. It also requires that the notice for filing an appeal be extended from the present 30 days to 45 days.
The bill, SB 346, passed 137 to 7. House changes require it to go back to the Senate. And the House votes to increase the state's rainy day fund. Today, the House passed SB 421, which moves the savings minimum from 10% to 15% of the previous year's revenues. Take a look.
This bill simply raises the revenue shortfall reserve. We strike 10%, put in 15%. As you know, going into recession like this year, we certainly could have used a little extra reserve, and I look forward to your favorable passage.
The bill, Senate Bill 421, passed 140 to 0. It goes to Governor Perdue.
Debate got a little heated today in the Senate prior to the passage of a measure that would prevent any government from requiring home builders to put sprinklers into new developments. And although the measure did eventually pass, it was not without some controversy.
It simply says that we will not let the state residential and fire building code or any other residential and fire building code adopted by any political subdivision of the state have a requirement that you must install fire sprinklers in a single-family dwelling or a residential building that has no more than 2 units, such as a duplex.
An unsuccessful amendment to allow cities and counties to create sprinkler regulations of their own made allies of Senators Nan Orrock, John Douglas, and John Wiles.
Current law does not prohibit a homeowner from putting sprinklers in their house. It just doesn't require it. Why don't we let adults make a decision? If they want to buy a house with sprinklers, go ahead and specify it in the construction.
The amendments were defeated. House Bill 1196 went on to pass 45-7. However, it was passed by substitute, sending it back to the House. In other Senate news, there was an agreement today to allow the Department of Transportation to enter into multi-year contracts. Here's Senator David Schaefer on House Bill 1135.
The Senate Transportation Committee, in its wisdom, has substantially rewritten the original bill. It permits multi-year contracting with only those funds being required for each year to be obligated that year under a set of safeguards that have been put in place.
And although there were some concerns about the governor having too much power over the financing in these agreements, House Bill 1135 did pass by a vote of 38-2, and it goes back over to the House because it was passed by substitute.
For some end-of-the-week analysis, we turn now to Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report. Tom is joining us live from the Capitol. Tom, thanks so much for being with us. I appreciate it. I know that I think I literally yanked you out of either the House or Senate that are currently considering the Conference Committee report on transportation. Am I right?
You're right. I was going from monitor to monitor to try to keep up with the debate, but they are doing it in two places at once. Makes it pretty tricky.
I know it does. Can you tell me about one or the other, or what's actually happening, or what the discussion is like in the chambers?
Well, the discussion so far has been both the House and the Senate. They're just explaining what is in the compromise that the negotiators worked out on the transportation funding plan. You're getting some pushback from some Democrats like Vincent Ford in the Senate who aren't happy with the way the bill turned out, I think because of some of the aspects of MARTA. But they're basically talking their way through the bill as they do in any kind of Senate debate. And within a very few minutes, we may have a vote in both chambers on whether to accept or reject the Conference Committee report. If they accept it, it is, as they said, the end of a long road, a 3-year road, and they've got a plan to send to the governor.
Let's touch on MARTA. I know there was some concern because those that are very close to MARTA really need some money for some of the maintenance and operation, not just capital outlay projects. And I think that was where some of the friction was being created. Am I right?
You are correct. And the bill, as they have it now, would give MARTA some funding flexibility that would make somewhere around $10 to $15 million extra available to them. It doesn't get rid of their whole deficit, but it certainly does help a lot. And if one of these transportation sales tax gets approved for the Atlanta region, MARTA can use some of that money for operations and maintenance as well. So it doesn't get MARTA all the way there, but it does help them. It gives them more than they had before.
All right. Well, this might be historic. Again, as you pointed out earlier, that this has been many years in the making. So it'll be very interesting to see if both bodies can actually agree on the same piece of legislation and it actually appeals to the governor. Very quickly, what's going on with the ethics package? Senate Bill 17, that was pulled off the House floor and committed back to rules. This is the Speaker's bill.
That's right. They wanted to make yet some more last-minute amendments to the bill. I believe it's going to come out sometime later tonight, and I think the Speaker is committed to getting a bill that does make some fairly extensive revisions to the state ethics code. It's just taking them a while to get all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, as they say. But I think we're going to see a vote on that later tonight.
Do you think it was because the computers were down at the Capitol today? We haven't made that point on the show tonight, but the Capitol computers were down for several hours today.
That's an excuse they're using to cover a multitude of sins here, but yes, apparently an antivirus software went viral and it shut down a lot of the inter-computer network. It made it impossible for a lot of people to work. I don't know at this point if they've got it fixed or not, but I'm hearing that as an excuse for almost everything.
All right. Something else we need to keep our eye on, and that is the budget. But for right now, Tom, I am going to let you get back to the House and Senate chamber. Thank you so much for taking a moment to chat with us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon. In other news, the House okays a bill that gives preference to in-state builders, architects, and contractors when putting a public works project out to bid. It also gives some clarity to many aspects of this process. Here's Representative Earl Earhart on Senate Bill 447.
What 447 does is it somewhat levels the playing field for Georgia's designers and contractors when they compete for Georgia public works projects. What it does is it establishes a definition of a Georgia resident business. And what they've done for that, effectively they say you've physically conducted business in Georgia for at least 1 year prior to any bid or proposal being submitted. And it doesn't allow you to include a post office box, a job trailer, or that type of thing. You can see that could be games. You could come in, apply for a Georgia business license, actually come in and create a storefront, so to speak, and then you would be a Georgia business. We've had laws similar to this on the books for years. What Senator Bullock is attempting to do is to get some clarity with respect to this. Also, it is only a reciprocal preference. Only if and only if another state, another municipality has a preference in a state where that is happening, can you apply this preference in the state of Georgia? That's fairly similar in contracting across this nation. The second thing it does, and I find this much more important, for many years it establishes that the state construction manual will be the manual that we use to procure and to deliver projects for the state of Georgia.
The bill, Senate Bill 447, passed 152 to 4, but due to House floor amendments and some other changes, the bill does go back to the Senate.
Today, the Senate passed a bill that would require the use of lethal injection instead of gas chambers to euthanize dogs and cats. Only a few counties still use gas chambers in Georgia. Senator Renee Unterman presented House Bill 788 and expressed her willingness to support an amendment to the bill in order to get this legislation passed. Lawmakers Adam Bridges has that story.
You know, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm willing to compromise. This bill has been in the General Assembly for several years now, and if this is a method to get it on the books, then I'm willing to compromise and get it on the books.
Senator John Bullock's amendment would give animal shelters and other facilities an additional 3 years to switch to lethal injection. Senator Bill Heath sparked a debate when he argued that gas chambers are more humane than lethal injections.
There's no trauma to it. There's folks that buy a lot of things to get the feeling that you get from carbon monoxide poisoning. So when you read about gas chambers and you think of the evil things that gas chambers have been used for, try to disassociate that with this process. This is a very humane way to end a life.
Carbon monoxide is dangerous, it is poisonous, it is deadly. And for the senator to come to the well to say that it made you feel good, made you woozy, it's just inconceivable that we would say that.
Today, the Senate passed HB 788 by substitute as amended, and it will likely go to conference committee. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Adam Bridges.
Also today, the controversial bill that seeks to eliminate abortions based on coercion or to eliminate a race or gender passed the House Judiciary Civil Committee today. Senate Bill 529 holds doctors legally responsible for performing an abortion that is coerced. A controversial substitute was presented but failed.
Let the chair clarify, okay? You've got Senate Bill 529, the version of the bill that came over from the Senate, LC 294296 ERS. We are currently on that version. You've got the substitute, as amended at this point, LC 294417 ERS that was presented by Chairman Willard.
I do not see any logical connection between those two. With the original bill, the intent was to outlaw a criminal abortion which dealt with gender selection or race selection. Here we have basically what is a substitute that is dealing with insurance requirements and posting of a sign, of all things, to try to take the place of a criminal code section for taking the life of an unborn child.
Discussion about these bills was lost in parliamentary procedure. People got confused about what they were voting for and what they were not voting for.
This is a very tightly crafted bill that does exactly what it's intended to do. We've had some of the best attorneys in the nation work on it, and we're excited that this committee is chosen to move it forward to the Rules Committee for consideration by the full House.
Again, Senate Bill 529 did pass committee, and it now moves to House Rules.
Well, in honor of our 40th season, it's time for another Lawmakers flashback. Tonight, Senate Rules Chairman David Scott rails against the House and Senate leaders in an appeal to get legislative oversight for Atlanta's cash-strapped Grady Hospital. This is from 2000.
I come before you this morning to ask you to get some respect for your Senate Rules Chairman, who has been disrespected by the House of Representatives. I have tried everything I could do to get my bill passed.
Senator, no
for it to be held up by the majority leaders in the House and the Senate is wrong. These are my constituents. These are my constituents, and I want the Speaker to know to those old black people in line at Grady Hospital that are dying in lines because they can't get their medicine, are being held up by two senators who have a direct conflict of interest. It's a travesty. They don't care about Grady.
Out of order, Senator.
They care only about how much they can get out of gravy in their pockets. And I'm sick of it.
Out of order, Senator.
Yeah, I'm out of order. This whole place is out of order. And I hope that the people across Georgia will realize this day how dastardly and bastardly we are treating their taxpayer dollars. Somebody go over there and tell them to pass that Grady bill and stand up for dignity, stand up for respect, but more than anything, stand up for respect of your taxpayers' dollars.
Senator Scott's Grady oversight bill died in the House Rules Committee, but in 2008, the General Assembly did establish a nonprofit board to administer Grady Hospital. This has been a Lawmakers Flashback. I remember very well then Senator Scott's rail. That was my first season here at Lawmakers. Of course, now David Scott is a U.S. Congressman. If you'd like more Lawmakers Flashbacks, please remember to keep watching our 40th season of Lawmakers.
And now with news from around the state, we are joined by Ricky Bevington. I do remember that, too. I remember David Scott.
Wow.
He's fired up.
And fire.
Makes for good TV. What you got?
Well, thank you, Susan, and good evening. A new report claims there are design flaws of nuclear reactors that could be headed for Plant Vogtle near Augusta. A coalition of 12 environmental groups called Fair Winds Associate examined the Westinghouse AP1000 reactor. It says that the reactor's design does not include a secondary barrier to shield nuclear material from escaping in case the steel containment wall is damaged. Well, the design must be approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission before 2 of those reactors can be built at Plant Vogtle. A small community of Mennonites in South Georgia is close to winning the right to insure itself rather than using auto plans required by the state. A bill allowing the 100-member community to self-insure rather than buy car insurance, which is considered gambling in their religion, passed the Georgia Senate today. The bill is now headed to the governor's desk. The branch of the Eastern Pennsylvania Mennonite Church settled in the small town of Metter near Savannah, in 1992. Some members, though, have bought insurance policies to comply with state law, but they pay for damages out of their own pockets because they're not supposed to have insurance. And Georgia Tech has accepted an invitation to join the prestigious Association of American Universities. It's a big deal. This is an organization for institutions with strong research and academic programs. AAU membership includes 35 public, 26 private universities. Georgia Tech is the first new member in 9 years. There is more Georgia news at that website behind me, gpb.org, and you can always follow us throughout the day on Twitter at JPB News. I'm Ricky Bevington.
That's good news. Congratulations to Georgia Tech.
Great news.
Big feather in their cap. Thank you. Lawmakers is not going to be seen tomorrow because the Georgia General Assembly is going to be in recess. The General Assembly is going to reconvene Tuesday, April 27th for Legislative Day 39. Be sure to watch Lawmakers for all the news from under the Gold Dome on Tuesday, April 27th at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this program, please tune in when Lawmakers repeats tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. That is assuming you are up. Coming up on GPB, your Southern Garden. That program is next. Very quickly before we go tonight, I want to mention to you that U.S. Senator Johnny Isakson, he is up for re-election, and Labor Commissioner Michael Thurmond has decided he is going to run against Johnny Isakson. In a tearful speech today at the Capitol, he announced his candidacy again for U.S. Senate. And I'm being told we still don't have a vote on transportation. I'm getting fed that in my ear. Go ahead, Imwani. I'm sorry, dear.
Sorry about that. That's our program for the 38th legislative day of the 2010 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Imwani Lawson, live from the newsroom here at the Capitol.
Tuesday, April 27th, for the next Lawmakers at 7 p.m., only here on GPB. Good night, everybody.
Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
And by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.